Boeing 747 was ready to take off on the runway. Amidst the dense fog, the pilot raised the thrust lever and turned on the headlights, and the aircraft had now crossed the takeoff speed, a speed from which it is almost impossible to return. But at this moment, a shadow started appearing in the fog, and this shadow was of another Boeing 747, which was now just a few meters away in the opposite direction on the same runway. It is very difficult to imagine what happened after this. The question is, how did the situation reach here? What was the air traffic controller doing? And what was that one small mistake which gave birth to the most dangerous accident in aviation history? This sad incident occurred in Spain's Canary Islands, which the world today remembers as the Tenerife airport disaster. Nazreen, the story begins on 26 March 1977, a day before the accident, when Pan Am Flight 1736, a Boeing 747 jumbo jet, takes off from Los Angeles Airport. It had to land in New York and pick up some passengers, and then its final destination was Las Palmas, a city in the Canary Islands across the sea. It was a chartered flight and therefore fully booked, with most of the passengers being older who are planning to enjoy a cruise in Las Palmas. Las Palmas is the capital of the Canary Islands, which is the southernmost part of Spain, about 100 kilometers from the coast of Morocco. This place is very famous all over the world for its tropical climate. But in 1977, behind the beautiful branch of the Canary Islands, a political tension was hidden. Here, a group called MPA-IAAC was raising its voice for the independence of the Canary Islands from Spain. And in its campaign, this group often resorted to violence. And one such violent event started this dangerous accident. Pan Am Flight 1736 picked up passengers from New York's JFK International Airport and departed for Las Palmas Island. Its cabin crew included 56-year-old Captain Victor Grubbs, First Officer 39-year-old Robert Brake, and 46-year-old flight engineer George Vaughn, along with 13 flight attendants and 380 passengers. These were all the details of Pan Am Flight 1736, which was now cruising over the Atlantic Ocean. Now, let's come to the other plane, which was to be the victim of the same accident. KLM Flight 4805 was being prepared at Amsterdam Airport in the Netherlands. This was also a Boeing 747, and it too had to go to Las Palmas in the Canary Islands. Its cockpit included 50-year-old Captain Jacob, 42-year-old First Officer Klaas, and 48-year-old flight engineer William. There were 11 flight attendants and 235 passengers on board. KLM Flight 4805 took off from Amsterdam International Airport after boarding. Now, both these aircrafts were headed towards Las Palmas Airport in the Canary Islands. Meanwhile, at Las Palmas Airport, two men walk towards the terminal building and disappear after leaving a bag outside a flower shop.
A bag containing a bomb with a countdown timer. At exactly 1 p.m., a phone call comes to the reception of Las Palmas Airport. The man on the other end identified himself as belonging to the MPAIAC group, the same group mentioned at the beginning of the video, and said that bomb blasts are going to take place in Las Palmas Airport in the next 15 minutes. The airport staff immediately swung into action and evacuated the entire Las Palmas Airport before 15 minutes, and their stampede turned into panic when exactly 15 minutes later, a massive explosion occurred. Due to this blast, a large part of the roof of the terminal building collapsed. But after this, all activities of Las Palmas Airport were suspended. All flights were canceled, and the flights which were to land here were diverted. After some time, KLM Flight 4805, coming from Amsterdam, had reached near Las Palmas. But the air traffic controller informed them about the explosion at the airport and instructed the flight to land at the airport of Tenerife Island, which was 110 kilometers away from here. After flying for another 25 minutes, the captain of KLM landed on runway 30 of Tenerife Airport at 1:38 p.m. At the same time, Pan Am Flight 1736, coming from New York, had also reached near Las Palmas, and it was also diverted to Tenerife Airport. At this time, almost all the flights were being diverted to Tenerife Airport because it was the nearest airport. Now, the rush at Tenerife Airport was increasing. Let us tell you here that Tenerife Airport is a really small airport in a hilly area. Its height is around 2,000 feet, very close to the Atlantic Ocean. This area is surrounded by high mountains, and due to this, when the moist winds of the Atlantic Ocean collide with the mountain and go upwards, they immediately cool down and turn into clouds, And it is very normal for all this to happen suddenly here. When the KLM Flight and KLM Flight landed at Tenerife Airport, the visibility was absolutely fine. But now suddenly, the visibility here had reduced due to clouds. When there were clouds on the runway, the visibility would reduce to 300 meters, and in the next moment, everything would be visible clearly up to 2 kilometers. Now, how long they had to stay here at the airport was not confirmed at the moment. Passengers were deboarded so that they could freshen up after the long flight. So late, KLM Flight 4805, which was to go back to Amsterdam, decided to refill its fuel tank here, so that when Las Palmas Airport reopens, time is not wasted in refueling there. They had just started refueling when the news of Las Palmas opening came. Both flights reboarded passengers. But the taxiway was blocked due to KLM's refueling. Tenerife Airport is a small airport with just one runway, one taxiway, and an apron where the terminal is located, which you can see in this animation. It was quite abnormal to have so much rush here, and that too, the rush of Boeing jumbo jets.
KLM Flight 4805 was unable to leave the airport and onto the runway due to refueling. They were told to wait at the airport until KLM was done. At 4:45, KLM's refueling was over and the captain prepared to pull off the taxiway. The apron was now full of other planes blocking the taxiway. In order to get to the east end of the runway for takeoff, the controller instructed the KLM pilots who were parked on the extreme west side of the taxiway to taxi onto the runway and prepare for takeoff by making a 180-degree turn at the extreme east end. When KLM 4805 began taxiing, the controller instructed Pinam Air to follow KLM on the runway, but to get on the taxiway from exit C3, as it was the runway from which KLM 4805 was to take off. Visibility was very poor and was getting worse with every passing minute. KLM 4805 crossed the entire runway while taxiing and came to the eastern end by making a 180-degree turn and coming into takeoff position. Pinam Air pilots also began taxiing on the runway, but due to fog, they were able to see exits C1 and C2, but missed exit C3. Because exit C3 was going back towards the apron, perhaps that is why they could not see C3. Secondly, there was a lack of sign marks at Tenerife Airport. Runway exits are indicated on the tarmac itself, but these sign marks were missing here. When Pan Am Flight 736 was crossing C2, the captain of KLM 4805 asked for permission to take off from the control tower. And from here, a series of back-to-back confusions started. Both these planes were not visible from the control tower due to fog, and neither was there a radar system installed at this airport. At this time, the control tower started telling KLM which route they had to take after takeoff, but nowhere in this message were they given permission to take off. But KLM thought that perhaps they had already got permission to take off, and the captain of KLM replied, "We are at takeoff." Now actually, is whether they said we are at takeoff or we are taking off, it is not clear yet. But in response to this, the control tower said okay. But after a gap of a few seconds, the control tower cleared, "Stand by for takeoff, I will call you."
Levagione. Into center. Takeoff.
This was a very important message, in which it was clearly told not to take off now. But this message did not reach the cockpit of KLM.
Aegean. Now going to center. One takeoff.
Because at this time, on the runway itself near C3, the pilot of Pan Am Flight 736, who was listening to this entire conversation, also relayed a message: "We are still down the runway." That is, the control tower's message to KLM to stand by and Pan Am's message both were relayed at the same time, due to which only a distortion, like sound, was heard in the cockpit of KLM. Pan Am's Flight 736, which had now inadvertently crossed C3, was told by the control tower to inform them when they were exiting the runway, to which the Pan Am pilots replied okay. But by this time, the captain of KLM Flight 4805 had raised the thrust levers, thinking that the control tower's permission had been granted. Now here, the flight engineer of KLM had heard the message given by the control tower to the Pan Am flight, and he immediately told the captain that they were still on the runway. But for some reason, the captain probably understood something else in the noise and just said, "Oh yes," and continued with the takeoff. But due to the fog, he could see only an area of 300 meters. Meanwhile, suddenly the Pan Am pilots saw headlights on the runway amidst the fog. At first they thought that maybe the KLM flight was stalled, but the next moment they realized that it was moving towards them very fast. They immediately tried to turn the plane, but it was too late. The right engine of KLM blew away. The first-class portion of Pan Am, the landing gear also broke, and the plane fell 150 meters away on the runway.
and a terrible fire broke out in it because its fuel tank was full. So the intensity of the fire can be easily guessed. All the 248 passengers present in it died on the spot.
There, the passengers of KLM Flight did not even get a chance to think what had happened. The first-class passengers died on the spot. But many passengers of the economy class below got a chance to come out through the hole in the roof. Many saved their lives by jumping from a height of 20 feet. Out of the 396 passengers of the KLM Flight, only 61 people survived. Perhaps more people survived, but due to the fog, the control tower came to know about this accident a little later. That too, when another plane, standing on the apron, saw the flames flaring on the runway and informed the control tower. The rescue service vehicles were also not able to move fast due to the fog. In this accident, a total of 583 lives were lost in a blink of an eye. In the investigation, the cockpit voice recorders of both the planes were examined, and from here, all the details came to light which you have seen in this video. The investigation team concluded that there was a chain of events behind this accident. First, the bomb blast at Las Palmas, and then KLM filling its fuel tank at Tenerife Airport and blocking the taxiway. If they had not done this, KLM Flight 736 would have taken off earlier. After that, the visibility suddenly decreased, and KLM missed the C3 exit. But the investigation team held the crew of KLM Flight 4805 responsible for this accident. Because after all, they continued the takeoff without permission, even though 5 seconds before the flight engineer had stopped the captain. The Tenerife airport disaster proved to be a wake-up call for the entire aviation industry. After this accident, many changes were seen in the aviation industry. Call science was changed. Their rules were changed. Radar was made mandatory at all airport and holding points, and indicators on the runway were made mandatory. Today, there are 2 airports on Tenerife Island. The one where this accident took place is the Northern Airport, while a new airport has also been built in the south, whose height is low and visibility is not affected due to clouds and fog. Hope you will like and share this video of World Trending Wave. Thank you very much for your loving comments. See you in the next great video.